So I watched this movie when it came out on the 4th, but until now I didn't get around to recording a review. I don't know, I have this problem where I struggle between just releasing something that I want to release and just not feeling motivated because of certain issues, but also a big element to losing motivation is the fact that I overthink originality. It's important to be original, and if you're just releasing another thing that 100 other people have released, but thousands more have released who aren't near the level that the other 100 people are, it's just really hard to get out of your head that way. But I'm hoping even though if I'm releasing something that somebody else might have released before, I'm still unique enough or have a different enough opinion to stand out. So my first initial thoughts, so I'm not going to go into any spoilers right away, I'll let you know when I do. However, if I accidentally spoil something, well, I mean, that's sort of what you get for watching content about what it is you haven't seen yet, but I understand people look for reviews because they want to know if going to see a movie is a waste of their time or not. I've argued this position for probably a couple years now. So a lot of people, they describe Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy as dark and gritty, and I could not disagree more. I do not agree that Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, so that'd be Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, I do not agree that that trilogy, that series of movies, or any of those movies, I don't think any of them are dark and gritty. Well, maybe Batman Begins can be the closest to actually meeting dark and gritty, but to me, dark and gritty isn't accurate entirely. I'll agree that it's serious. Those movies are serious, but it feels more like an epic and adventurous, which is the epic, I think, is what Christopher Nolan was going for. Otherwise, why would you cast Christian Bale, Katie Holmes? So it felt like an epic, and it has dark moments, don't get me wrong. Obviously, the death of his parents is a dark moment, and maybe you'll feel bad for him. If you're familiar with the Batman mythos, maybe the death of his parents isn't going to get you as much, because it's Batman, we know him, we know his parents got shot, and we see it in Batman 89, and we see parts of it in pretty much every other Batman depiction, and part of every Batman story is going to harken back to the death of his parents. Although, so one thing I want to address right now, slightly off topic, we only have one Batman origin story, and that's Batman Begins, as far as live action goes. I remember talking to a buddy years ago when this movie was still somewhat speculation, and he's like, oh, how many Batman origin stories do we need? And I was like, we only have one. I told him that. We only have one, that's Batman Begins. Just because you see the death of his parents as a memory or a flashback, it doesn't mean that's the origin story. Batman 89, he's already Batman. Anyway, so the Dark Knight trilogy has dark moments, but the way I describe it is it's more grounded. It has dark moments, but it's grounded and it takes its material very seriously, but not too seriously. And it has more funny moments. When I watch it, I feel hopeful. Yes, you see the death of his parents in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, but I'm not mad about it because I know where the story is going. We're gonna get Batman, and I feel hopeful. Because even in his parents' death, his dad tells him not to be afraid. And it's like, okay, well, I already feel better about his death because at least he was able to pass on some wisdom to his son in his death and saying, hey, it's okay. Don't be afraid. You're going to be a strong man someday. That type of stuff. So let's get to the Batman. The Batman. This movie with Robert Pattinson, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Zoe Kravitz and various others. The Batman is a dark and gritty movie. This is the darkest Batman movie. This is a Batman movie that can actually be considered gritty. There is, so I don't want to say this is the most violent Batman movie. Batman v Superman is very violent. It's more gruesome, but that feels wrong. Even though I love the warehouse scene, but seeing him kill people is wrong. I mean, I want to see him make people bleed and brutalize people, but this isn't going for that R rating that the extended cut of Batman v Superman is going for. However, the violence in this movie, to me, it has more of an impact. A good example of what I mean is watch The Dark Knight Rises, watch Batman Begins. Whenever he's beating up goons, whenever Batman is beating up goons, you don't really feel it. Like, you're okay with him beating up goons, and obviously those fight scenes didn't age well, and even at the time of those movies, I wouldn't say they seemed like they were going to age well at all, but they're such good movies that we can overlook them. But in this, the fight scenes are awesome, but they feel like they have impact. You feel why he's doing it, and you understand that these people are hurt. You know, they've faced the wrath of Batman, and that's pretty awesome in my opinion. And I like that aspect about this movie. Even the goons or the nobodies that Batman beats up, or in regards to the story, when they get beat up, you feel it, as in, it makes sense. You're like, holy crap. This movie feels like it's in the realm of Seven and Zodiac. More like Seven, and the reason why I say more like Seven is because Zodiac, it has a bit of a... Zodiac is dark material, but the tone of it, even though it's dark, there's a bit of a campy tone, or with some of the music choices, or Jake Gyllenhaal's character, there's a bit of a comedic undertone. Zodiac and Seven being both directed by David Fincher, it sort of has that style. I would almost say it has the tone of Gone Girl and Seven. Zodiac was probably the first movie that I watched on my 72-inch TV, and Tenet was the second. So, you know, a detective type movie with a Christopher Nolan style film. So I feel like watching The Batman, which is sort of a spiritual successor to Christopher Nolan's type of Batman, but it's actually dark and gritty. Batman in this movie, holy crap, he feels scary. I wasn't one of those that wrote off Robert Pattinson because of Twilight. He's an actor, he's going to act, he is going to work with what he's given, and sometimes the material that you were given is not up to par with where your talents are, or even where your previous films have been. Just name any good actor, they have been in garbage. I think Clint Eastwood's magnum opus, in my opinion, is his movie Gran Torino, which was, at the time and the following decade, the last movie that he acted in and directed at the same time. Changeling was a pretty good movie, but when Clint Eastwood made his return in both acting and directing simultaneously in The Mule, that movie, I wanted to like it, and the trailer made it seem like it was alright, but the movie was flat, and to me, it really seemed like an excuse for Clint Eastwood to see some titties. So The Mule was disappointing. I haven't gotten around to watching that latest one that came out. I can't even remember the title. I don't look at an actor and necessarily write them off because of certain performances, given the context around it. Now, if there's a consistent track record of an actor being bad, or they're only playing one character type because their range is very limited, and the directors don't work around their range limit, then yeah, you know, I would have been concerned. But Robert Pattinson, he has the jaw to play Batman. He's not huge, he's not a big guy, but he's not a pipsqueak either. Yes, in Twilight, he was much skinny. He was played to be skinny, but in that movie, he's mostly wearing black. And the aesthetic of that movie makes him look like a pipsqueak, although I never got that idea that he was a pipsqueak. Anyway, he plays a very good, young, and angry Bruce Wayne. And one thing I'll say about this movie is that it is not really a Bruce Wayne movie. It's more of a Batman movie. I mean, you can't separate Bruce Wayne or Batman. Those characters are a necessity. You can't have a Batman movie about this particular phase of Batman and have the character named Jimmy Murdoch or something random. You can't do that. That's just not going to happen. He would be upset. I would be upset if it wasn't Bruce Wayne. This movie, so in the other Batman movies, it did feel like Batman was a detective in the other movies, kind of. Like, there were scenes where they tried to sprinkle in the fact that he's a detective. You know, he's pondering a question, he's trying to solve it, and then he comes to the answer. Or you see a scene where he's running some sort of analysis on something to get a certain answer. Or he's interrogating somebody by beating them up. And they sprinkled that into each movie as it progressed. You do get scenes of that, but you don't get the idea that it's about the world's greatest detective. Instead, it's more that he's brooding and he beats up goons and he stops crime, and there's this character named the Joker. This one, you could have easily titled this The World's Greatest Detective, if you were going for a campy style, of course, but this is serious, so it's called The Batman. But he feels like the world's greatest detective in this. And like I said, it feels like the movie Seven and Zodiac. And Seven is one of my favorite movies of all time. And Zodiac, I have a good experience with. And again, that was one of the first movies I watched on my 72-inch TV. Not just movies, one of the first things I watched on my 72-inch. So this movie is a bit long, but personally, I cannot comprehend why people bitch about long movies. As if you don't already sit on your ass for 3 hours a day or binge watch a 5 to 12 episode Netflix miniseries, or like you're not binge watching anything else. I get it when you're at home, sitting on your butt, not really doing anything, or just binge watching something. You have freedom, you can pause whatever it is that you're watching, you can take a break and come back later. You have that option. But if you sit in a movie theater, you sort of make a commitment. You have to be quiet, you know, you can't really have any distractions. Like, you can't look something up real quick on your phone or on your laptop, or depending where your TV's at, you're not gonna get up, grab a snack real quick. That's just not what's gonna happen. So I get that you're more limited in a movie theater, but come on, people, don't pretend like you're not already sitting on your ass for 3 hours. Come on now, come on. I honestly, this movie doesn't feel like it's that long, even though it legitimately is that long. It's a longer movie. It's the longest Batman movie. It's not the longest movie with Batman in it, but it's the longest Batman movie. Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. I'm sorry if I keep saying Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. That is the closest Batman live action depiction or films that we can compare this to, because these are both very serious and have a very limited amount of camp. This movie is not as philosophically focused as the Nolan films, and therefore I don't feel comfortable saying that this Batman movie is as good as the Christopher Nolan's film. But this Batman movie will contend with the Christopher Nolan films. You can't really compare the two sets of movies. They're very different. I think the philosophical focus in Christopher Nolan's style elevates the Dark Knight trilogy. But this feels like obviously a movie directed by the guy who directed the two latter Planet of the Apes movies, Rise of the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes. Those movies are dark, they're gritty, they're serious. You can make video essays about them, you can analyze the hidden meaning about them, but they're not intended to be philosophical movies like Christopher Nolan films. I would say that this may not be my favorite Batman live-action film. This is my favorite Batman depiction. I know a lot of people, when they saw the Riddler's costume, even people I respect, they were upset that it wasn't accurate to the comic book. And I'm going to be honest with you, I both understand the people who say this is an alternative universe, but I am more sympathetic to the people who are mad that these aren't accurate depictions visually. But I am okay with adapting material for the big screen because, listen, even in the Silver Age or the Golden Age of comics, there's some great storylines, but I would not want to watch a movie based on those. Otherwise, you're getting something closer to Adam West's Batman or Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. Those are comic book movies. There's a lot of early Batman material. Even the darker comics, when they became darker, still have that camp, which I don't necessarily want to see in live action. I'm okay with it being in the Suicide Squad. That's perfectly fine. I'm okay with it being a Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn, in my opinion, knows how to make a campy comic book movie. Even if I feel like he tries to be too edgy, I do have my issues with certain elements of rated R superhero movies. With that being said, this is my favorite live action Batman depiction, and I'm okay with the change of the Riddler, because this did feel like the Riddler. This did feel like a Riddler character that if you had a Flashpoint storyline or some sort of alternate universe storyline or a what if storyline, this felt like a Riddler that would be true to the character while being different. Like a variant, to reference Marvel. The movie overall I thought was really good. There was one line that took me out of it, which was the woke line, but I'm not gonna go into spoilers. I mean, it's not really a spoiler if I did bring it up, but I'll be more specific when I get into more spoiler territory. It's from a character you would expect it to be from, although it did feel like it came out of nowhere. It's very jarring, especially if you're not woke and you're not a silly person with silly political or economic beliefs. It does feel jarring though, like I said. And like I mentioned before, this is less of a Batman movie. I mean, less of a Bruce Wayne movie. And this is very much a Batman movie. Very, very much a Batman movie. So I want to talk about Jim Gordon's character. I despise race swaps heavily, but there are certain times where I will look past it or even agree with it. This is an actor who I could believe is a Jim Gordon, even though I hate race swaps. Another example of a race swap I'm okay with outside of this series, but from Warner Brothers, Loud Car. Anyway, I Am Legend. Robert Neville is a white character. He's an Aryan. He's blonde, blue eyes. I'm okay with Will Smith being him. Hey, that was an older book. Not a lot of people read it, and they went with the actor at the time who was just elevated to such a level. They chose the star of that time. Another race swap I'm okay with as far as fictional characters is Willy Wonka. I think Donald Glover, if he does end up being Willy Wonka, I don't know the status of that production. He, I think, has what it takes to be a very good Willy Wonka, even if the character is historically white. Otherwise, I hate race swaps that are done for no reason or that are done just because we need people of color and representation. I hate that shit. But I'm okay with this guy being Jim Gordon. Jeffrey Wright feels like a Jim Gordon. As far as the other characters, Andy Serkis is a great Alfred. I'm okay with him being an Alfred. There's been so many, as far as the live action movies, I like Alfred being a little more useful. So I loved Alfred in the Dark Knight trilogy. Michael Caine, he's already a really good actor and I love him. But if you're going to have the older, more decrepit Alfred who can't, physically do a whole lot, at least you're going to have him as a very wise man, but who still can get involved, and it's believable that he would get involved. I didn't mind Batman v Superman's Alfred. That was a pretty good Alfred. And in that sort of realm, I feel like a combination between him and the Michael Caine Alfred is Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis is a great actor. I like that he played Caesar from the newer Planet of the Apes movies. He's a good actor. That was a good Alfred. Even though we didn't see a whole lot, I would love to see more of him as Alfred. I liked the cast for Falcone, Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, Colin Ferrel as Cobblepot. Those are all great. And I like the way Batman in this movie is shown as a freak. That's good. That's interesting. If you haven't seen the Batman, go watch it. Go watch it. It's been out for weeks now. Go watch it. If you can, if you have to leave town for a couple hours, go watch it. If you're gonna wait until it comes out on HBO Max, I understand. Good movies need to be watched on bigger screen. So if you have a buddy who has a 72-inch or bigger, go watch it. Go watch it. If you have a home theater, man, watch this movie on that. Make sure it's a quality screen. Alright, so now I'm going to go into the spoiler section, the more spoiler section. This isn't going to be a deep analysis, so I'm going to skip over a lot, but I just want to talk about how I feel. And again, I saw this weeks ago, so there's a lot of details that I am going to miss regardless. It's not like I took notes right after I went out of the movie. It's not like I was taking notes during the movie, and as of now, when I'm recording this, which is still in March, the movie is not available on digital, and according to my morals, I am not going to pirate. So the movie opens up. I can't remember if it opened up with the murder or if it opened up with the Halloween narration. Either way, the intro was amazing. The murder was amazing. It really set the tone. The narration from Batman with shots of the criminal element doing their thing and committing crimes. But upon seeing the bat signal, they get paranoid. They start looking in the shadows. And to me, that was the greatest depiction of criminals being afraid of Batman. There's 3 scenes that come to mind from other Batman movies that remind me of a bit of what this was going for. Like, they were trying to do this sort of the same thing, but it wasn't as well done. Batman 89, when you first see Batman, I think, if I remember correctly, they're talking about him as if he's a legend, and you see Batman in the background, but his suit was so stiff, and of course, it was the late 80s, and movie making wasn't as grand as it is now. It was a little more primitive, to use the word primitive. It's not as cool seeing Batman for the first time in that movie. It feels campy. It doesn't feel believable. You don't get the idea that he's scary. Fast forward to Batman Begins, obviously a Batman origin story. There's 2 scenes. There's the first one when I can't remember if it was Falcone's group, Maroni's group, one of the groups he was going after at the docks when he's taking people out. That's a cool scene, but I don't get the idea that he's scary. You know, even though I wouldn't trade that scene in for the world, it works for Batman Begins. It's just, you know, I don't get the idea that these criminals are afraid. But then later on in that movie, you have a line where Batman's he's trying to intimidate a crew instead of a warehouse. You have Cillian Murphy's character, the Scarecrow, talking about the Batman, and he's looking up, and, you know, they're trying to find him, and you know, you get the idea that, you know, Batman is somewhere in the shadows. He's going to find you, but it doesn't have the same impact. You have Batman v Superman in that warehouse scene, where the criminals aren't really afraid of Batman. You know, they're ready to take him out. I don't get the idea that they're afraid of him. I mean, I get the idea that they don't know what they're dealing with. They don't know. I mean, they know what they're dealing with, but they don't know how to handle what they're dealing with. So I don't get the idea that he's scary, even though he's brutal in that. In this, though, I feel like Batman is scary. And that's awesome. I like that. Man, I really it felt good watching this. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to explain. The impact of Batman's scariness was fucking awesome. You know, they're looking into the shadows because maybe Batman could be there. Maybe he could get me. He's making criminals think twice. Although he's not making them think enough, because obviously they're still committing crime. And that's something we could talk about, is does Batman encourage crazy people like the Joker and Riddler? So the opening of the movie, you know, it does feel scary. This entire movie, like I said in my non-spoiler section, it feels like the movie Seven, but with a Batman in it. We get a scene that to me is very reminiscent of the train scene from Joker, which is still sort of in the opening of the movie. Batman saves a man who's about to be robbed after getting off a train. They're encouraging, it's this gang, and they're encouraging one of their younger recruits or younger members to do this sort of initiation, which is to rob and, I assume, beat up, if not murder, this innocent bystander who's just trying to go about his business. Batman saves him, and this sets the tone of just how brutal Batman is, but it's not over the line brutal. He's not going to kill you, but your hospital bills will. I mean, Batman just beats the crap out of them, and oh my gosh. That's what I mean by the violence feels more impactful. You understand what's going on. You feel, or you empathize with Batman's anger. You empathize with the criminals. Like, you, not as in you feel bad for them. You don't sympathize with them, but you understand why they would be scared of a character like Batman. Eventually, Batman visits a crime scene where the murder took place, which is the mayor of Gotham. It's a really cool scene. It felt like a very intense murder scene from, I would say, from Zodiac. Because I don't think, in 7 you don't see the murders. You see the crime scenes. Or you see the aftermath. In Zodiac, though, and I'm going to compare those two films because more detective, going after a serial killer, and they're directed by the same guy. I feel like it has elements of both. You actually see some of what the serial killer is doing. You see the Riddler kill this guy, and to me that felt like an intense scene. I felt actually scared. I mean, I wasn't scared, but I felt that it was scary, if that makes sense. Too many people, they have too much pride to admit that something is scary. You know, like, oh, I wasn't scared. Like, okay, I'm not asking if you're scared. I'm asking if you thought it was scary. And the Riddler's murder scenes, they're pretty scary. You know, I wasn't scared, but they were definitely scary. They're dark. Batman goes to this crime scene. He's investigating. He seems a little still at first, but then you understand why he is still. He has contacts, which are revealed later on. He's, you know, basically taking video or taking photographs. You know, he's not really going to be, I mean, he could if he wanted to, but he's not supposed to go back to the crime scene. The police still look at him like he's a freak. The police commissioner and other police officers, they think Batman is a freak, and Jim Gordon sticks his neck out, but Jim Gordon gets berated by the police commissioner because, why are you bringing this clown freak, this circus freak, into our crime scene? And he's a vigilante, and vigilantism is looked at negatively, and oftentimes is, at least in this universe is against the law. Particularly Marvel universes because of the whole Civil War timeline, but in this DC universe, in almost every Batman depiction at first, yeah, you know, Batman isn't necessarily looked at as a good guy from the police perspective, but this is really one of the first times in live action where you actually see Batman work with the police. And I know Christopher Nolan's films tried to work against that until The Dark Knight Rises, when it became obvious that, hey, you know, this guy's gonna help us take the city back, so obviously we should work with him. And obviously Jim Gordon is the commissioner, and the truth about Harvey Dent Batman came out, and of course you have Robin's character. So obviously Batman kind of works with the police to take the city back. But you try to avoid that because it can be a bit campy if a masked vigilante is working with the police. It feels sort of surreal or fantastical, like it wouldn't happen. But the way it happens in this is handled well because it feels like you could accept that it's happening on screen. But, you know, again, Gordon sticks his neck out. He defends Batman, and we see just how isolated Bruce is, how isolated Batman is. This scene, we see the world's greatest detective. He actually does detective stuff, which is awesome. He's taking video, he's solving riddles. We actually see the process of it. We get to see his gears turning. It's not just he's analyzing something and waiting for something to come up. It's not just Alfred giving him some sort of advice and then voila, he knows what to do now. It actually feels like he's gathering evidence. So that's nice. It's more than just pondering a question. We get a few red herrings as to who kidnapped Catwoman's friend, because she gets kidnapped. Friend or girlfriend, it's not clear, whatever, don't really care. Batman uses Catwoman to gather information, and he uses the contacts that he used at the crime scene, which explains why he was stiff, because he's trying to get clear footage. Although I did notice during that scene, you see Zoe Kravitz blinking, but on the monitor that Batman is watching, you don't see any blinking. It doesn't take me out of the movie necessarily, and it doesn't mean that the movie would be better if they showed her blinking on Batman's monitor, but it's something I did notice. It's something I did... It's not a nitpick because she should be blinking. You should see it from Batman's monitor, but it is a nitpick in the sense that, well, it's not gonna make the movie better if you do see her blinking, but it's just something I noticed that for a second took me out because I found it distracting. But I mean, I really don't care. I just think it's funny. The district attorney, Gil Colson, you find out he's hanging out in this club, which is being ran by Falcone, or Falcone, however you want to pronounce it. He's a current district attorney. He's on the payroll, and eventually he gets kidnapped by Riddler in another scary type of scene, very reminiscent to the Zodiac movie when you see him doing his thing. But I'd say in darker tone to Zodiac. Zodiac had a weird tone, and I love it. But this has a very serious tone. It felt like Zodiac with the 7 tone. Very dark. Eventually, he forces the commissioner to crash the funeral of the mayor. And he has a bomb strapped to him, and it's a riddle for him and Batman to solve for the police. You get a really over-the-top, explosions don't kill me. Shrapnel from the explosion doesn't kill me. The blast, the shockwave from the explosion doesn't kill me. But the shockwave from the explosion does save me scene where Batman gets tossed, but he's unconscious. He wakes up in the police station, and Batman, he's about to throw down with some popo. He is about to throw down with police. I like the scene, him and Gordon, they devise a scheme for Batman to get out, which I really liked because it's kind of funny. You know, Batman knocks some sense into Gordon. It was real, but it wasn't real. It was planned. And Batman escapes. He goes to the police station. It's another one of those scenes where it feels impactful. You know, Batman is ready to throw down with some police, and even if he's outnumbered, because at this point he thinks they're corrupt. But Gordon's like, hey, you know, trust me, they're not all bad, and you're not going to win over the good ones who are skeptical of you if you start throwing down right now. Play your cards right. We get that scene, which I liked. Later on, you learn some stuff, and I was a bit worried they were going to go the Batman the Telltale series route, where his father, or his parents, mostly his father, is just like everybody else. He's just like Falcone. He's just like Maroni. He's just like Sionis. He's just like everybody else. And I was scared they're gonna go that route. I hate that route. I'm alright with it in the Telltale series game because they're trying to do their own interpretation, and I understand that it's separate from the other universes, but I really, really despise when they tried to make his character somebody that is a villain or that was just another mob boss, because to me that just ruins the character. Because I like the fact that Batman is sort of inspired by his father. He wants to do better. He wants to avenge their death. He wants to make sure nobody becomes like him and has to go through what he did, and I like that. And I think you ruin it when you make his father a villain. My goodness, I am so glad they didn't do that. You get some more cool detective scenes, some cool Riddler scenes. The movie eventually takes a turn that I did not see it going. You get some cool Catwoman stuff. Zoe Kravitz, I think, is a good Catwoman, despite her woke line, which was just out of fucking nowhere. But I would expect it to come from somebody like her. You get a cool scene where Riddler is talking to Batman, and, you know, Batman's trying to figure stuff out. It's sort of hinted that I don't know what to make of it quite yet, and it's been a while since I've seen the movie, and I only watched it once. The Riddler keeps saying Bruce Wayne, and I'm not entirely sure. I've seen the video theory where he actually does know, but I've seen others suggest that he doesn't know. But you get the idea that maybe the Riddler knows that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Obviously, the Riddler is extremely smart. Enigma is intelligent, smart, if not smarter than Batman. He keeps saying Bruce Wayne, and you're like, okay, does he know? I felt like he knew. Again, I don't know what to make of that. But then the scene where he's like, oh, you're really not as smart as I thought you were, or thought you are. There's a sort of, it came out of nowhere, the Riddler blows up the seawall and Gotham starts flooding. And that's sort of the pinnacle, the height of Batman's brutal nature, kind of. I say kind of. Well, it leads up to, like, the peak. You know, Batman is trying to stop crime, they're crashing some sort of event where a mayoral candidate is at, some political campaign or event for rich people, fundraiser, whatever. I don't remember exactly what it was. Batman goes there, tries to save some people, he beats the shit out of goons. Well, Batman naturally comes to sort of his limit. Now, understand that this isn't a physical peak Batman. Like, he's not as muscular as he's going to be. He's not as muscular as he could be. He's fast, you know, he has speed, but he's not the physical peak presence that he will eventually be. This is taking a more build-up approach to the Batman mythos, and this is a young Batman who's still making mistakes. He thinks he can just use his intelligence and brute force to beat people up, and he does. He's getting shot at, and he's trying to survive, but he eventually reaches his natural limit. And once it's clear that it might be over, you know, he's ready to just, you know, take a breather for a second. But the woman he begins to fall in love with, Catwoman, she's not a damsel in distress, but every character that is in the Batman mythos needs to be eventually saved by Batman. Get the fuck over it, feminists or retards who think that a damsel in distress is so insulting. She's threatened, so Batman takes a shot of PEDs, performance enhancing drugs, which is probably venom. And he gets up and he has this adrenaline and he is beating the fuck out of this guy, beating his fucking face in, and Catwoman looks at him. And for the first time, she shows fear. Her affect is fear. Her countenance shows that she's actually scared of what Batman's doing. And I think that's awesome because you see Batman in his primal, berserker, Wolverine type of rage. He's not going to kill the guy, but he very much could kill the guy. And he's sort of approaching that line. Eventually, though, he snapped back. And I love that scene because this is, oh my god, it's an ebb and flow. It's a juxtaposition between a Batman who's worn out, but he needs to keep operating, and if his will won't let him, then he's going to use some assistance. He's going to take some goddamn venom, and he's going to beat the living shit out of people that need the living shit beat out of them. And I like that about this movie. There is sort of a lesson to be learned that his brute force and his anger enough isn't going to be, it's not complete. He needs more. He's missing some pieces. So there's sort of a metaphorical scene where he uses the torch to guide people to safety, and people are following behind him. And to me, it's almost reminiscent of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns at the end when he's guiding the mutants into the cave. As Bruce Wayne, of course, but not as Batman. But this scene, it's sort of reminiscent of that. It's shot so beautifully because it's dark, right? You see his flare reflecting in the water. You see him leading a group of people out of the water. It's about as orchestrated but raw at the same time as you can get. And it doesn't feel campy. It's not one of those cheesy Batman's giving a speech and people are listening, they're looking at each other and you see them shaking their head. No, they're following him to safety. And they let the visual metaphor speak for itself. And then you get the shot of Gotham, which is flooded, the National Guard. You see Batman kind of looking up at the helicopter. And, oh man, it's just awesome. The more when I'm talking about it, the more I actually like it. It might be my second, third, or fourth favorite Batman movie. It's definitely within there. It's not my favorite Batman movie. The Dark Knight takes that. And in second place, it's either Batman Begins or The Dark Knight Rises. I know The Dark Knight Rises has some flaws, but I'm not gonna nitpick it like everybody else does. But the Batman falls somewhere in there.